Aaron Kosminski. Is he the real Ripper? Since the Victorian era, the enigmatic serial killer known as Jack the Ripper has captivated the imaginations of people across the globe. Between 1888 and 1891, Jack was notorious for brutally killing and dismembering at least 5 women in the Whitechapel district of London. Despite being seen by scores of witnesses leaving the scene of his crimes, he eluded arrest. Melville Macnaghten, the head of Scotland Yard, named 3 primary suspects: M.J. Druitt, Michael Ostrog, and Aaron Kosminski. Among true crime addicts, there are hundreds of hypotheses with other suspects. People have been trying to figure out the genuine identity of Jack the Ripper for over 134 years, yet all hypotheses are based on circumstantial evidence. Recent DNA evidence, however, suggests that Aaron Kosminski was Jack the Ripper. Numerous individuals have challenged the conclusions and rejected the evidence. What did this DNA analysis uncover, and what circumstantial evidence pointed to Kosminski being the genuine Jack the Ripper? Keep watching and decide for yourself. Reasons why Kosminski can be considered a viable suspect. Number 1. A traumatic upbringing and social circumstances. Aaron Kosminski's backstory is traumatic, as is the case with most serial killers. In Poland, he was raised in a Jewish household. After the murder of Tsar Alexander II in 1881, the Warsaw Pogrom took place, which was a violent uprising against Jewish people living there. Kosminski was just 16 years old when he witnessed the massacre of innocent people, maybe leaving him with what we know today as PTSD. His family fled Poland, first to Germany and then to England. Numerous Polish immigrants relocated to the Whitechapel neighborhood in the East End of London. The city was overpopulated with unemployed people, leading to an abundance of criminal activity. To live, many women were compelled to sell themselves on the streets. This was not exactly an ideal setting in which to start adulthood. Number 2. Kosminski apparently had a deep-seated hate for women. In contemporary studies of serial killers, a deep-seated hate for women is a prevalent thread. This stems from the belief that women are denying them sex and have had a streak of female rejections throughout their lives. Additionally, they may have had a poor relationship with their mothers. Jack the Ripper picked vulnerable women who, according to newspapers of the time, were either homeless or prostitutes as his victims. He removed their internal organs, and he also viciously mutilated the face of one of his victims, showing his unreasonable hatred towards this woman he probably did not know. Aaron Kosminski was 23 years old when the first murder happened. He never married and had terrible courting success with women. According to Scotland Yard's head of police, Melville Macnaghten, Kosminski was notorious for his loathing of women. Macnaghten wrote, "This man became insane owing to many years' indulgence in solitary vices. He had a great hatred of women, especially of the prostitute class, and had strong homicidal tendencies." Number 3. The Goulston Street Clue. On September 30th, 1888, Elizabeth Stride and Catherine Eddowes were murdered by Jack the Ripper on the same night. Soon after the murder, a piece of Catherine Eddowes' apron was discovered on the ground. "The Jews are the men that will not be blamed for nothing," was scrawled in chalk on a wall near Goulston Street. The word Jews was spelt J-U-W-E-S. The misspelling, together with the double negative, implies that English was not the perpetrator's first language. Some feel that this was written to blame Jews for the murder, while others believe the exact opposite. It has been the subject of considerable controversy and conjecture throughout the years. Sir Robert Anderson, the second Assistant Commissioner of Scotland Yard, was convinced that Jack the Ripper was Jewish. In Anderson's autobiography, he explains why he spent his life believing Aaron Kosminski to be Jack the Ripper, saying that he was safely caged in an asylum. Number 4. There was an eyewitness. Sir Robert Anderson was the second assistant commander of the London Metropolitan Police and helped in the Jack the Ripper investigation. Years after the investigation was over, he wrote in his memoirs that he was convinced Aaron Kosminski was, in fact, Jack the Ripper. Inspector-in-Chief Donald Sutherland Swanson had a copy of Anderson's book, and he had written his own notes in the margins that provided further information. This book was then given to the media by Swanson's grandson. According to these notes, a witness who saw the killer's face may have helped convict Aaron Kosminski as Jack the Ripper. However, since he was Jewish, this witness declined to testify against him. Anderson wrote, "The suspect was also a Jew, and also because his evidence would convict the suspect, and witness would be the means of murderer being hanged, which he did not wish to be left on his mind." Swanson noted in his comments, "Kosminski was the suspect." Our next point is possibly the only evidence we have that isn't circumstantial. Or is it? Number 5. The DNA evidence. Russell Edwards bought a shawl that belonged to Catherine Eddowes, the fourth victim of Jack the Ripper, in 2007. In 2014, he got the shawl analyzed for DNA, as he was so desperate to discover Jack the Ripper's identity. This genetic material was traced back to a living relative of Aaron Kosminski. Edwards was also the author of a book titled Naming Jack the Ripper, in which he details his decades-long examination of the case. However, there were allegations that the scientist who performed the DNA study, Jari Louhelainen, made an error. Critics refused to accept the DNA evidence until it was evaluated in a peer-reviewed publication by experts with no vested interest in the outcome. The data was published in the Journal of Forensic Sciences in 2019. It was established that Kosminski was the owner of the DNA sample. However, opponents still refused to accept that valid DNA evidence could have existed on the shawl for over a century without contamination. The journal article also noted that mitochondrial DNA cannot be used to identify a suspect, only to exclude them as the perpetrator. In addition, the shawl was not mentioned in any of the murder-related police records. Moreover, the origin of the evidence is a crucial prerequisite for the reliability of DNA testing. Did Eddowes even own the shawl? Consequently, it seems that new DNA evidence has increased the uncertainty surrounding Kosminski's status as the true Jack the Ripper. As with all cases of this magnitude and mystery, there are two divided camps on the guilt of any suspect. Kosminski, as a suspect, is no different. Of course, there is a fair amount of discussion on Reddit forums about the subject. One such post alludes to the fact that if Kosminski was the Ripper, why would he suddenly stop killing? At that time, at least, the late Philip Sugden was the most scholarly authority on the killings. He devotes a chapter to Kosminski in the complete history of Jack the Ripper. He found many flaws to Kosminski being the Ripper. To me, the most compelling was that if Kosminski was the Ripper, he would have killed 5 or 6 women over the course of a few months and then stopped killing for a couple of years prior to being put in an asylum. Even adding in the non-canonical killings, that still makes it unlikely, in my mind at least, that Kosminski could just stop killing for any length of time. Also, he was in asylums for over 2 decades. In the surviving records, there is very little indication that he was thought of as violent or dangerous. Sugden goes into the eyewitness accounts of the Ripper and points out how they don't match Kosminski too. Kosminski was admitted to the Mile End Old Town Workhouse on 12th of July 1890, owing to his increasing mental condition, with his brother verifying the admission. He was released 3 days later. On 4th of February 1891, he was presumably returned by the police to the workhouse, and on 7th of February he was moved to Colney Hatch Lunatic Asylum. Jacob Cohen, a witness to the certification of his admission, provided background information and alleged that Kosminski threatened his sister with a knife. It is uncertain if this refers to Kosminski's or Cohen's sister. Kosminski stayed in the Colney Hatch Lunatic Asylum for the next 3 years until being admitted to Leavesden Asylum on 19th of April 1894. According to case records, Kosminski had been unwell since at least 1885. His insanity manifested as auditory hallucinations a neurotic dread of being fed by others that compelled him to pick up and consume food that had been dumped as trash, and an unwillingness to wash or bathe. His insanity was attributed to self-abuse, which is believed to be a euphemism for masturbating. It seems that his bad nutrition has left him in an emaciated condition for years. In February of 1919, he weighed just 44 kilograms. He passed away the next month at age 53. A forum post on Quora.com makes a valid argument that due to his mental illness, Kosminski could not have been Jack the Ripper. The post reads as follows: "Clearly Kosminski was mentally ill, but while he was in an asylum, he was never violent, except once when he attacked somebody with a chair. It is said that Kosminski threatened his sister with a knife. We don't know exactly what happened, but it probably was a domestic argument. Domestic violence was common in the East End of London. There is no evidence that Kosminski was Jack the Ripper. Jack the Ripper was cunning and clearly had his wits about him. This does not sound like Kosminski at all. He sounds too mentally disorganized to be the Ripper. Also, it hardly seems likely that a man who murdered and mutilated 5 or more women would calmly live in an asylum for years, only once doing anything violent. Although the evidence against Aaron Kosminski is only circumstantial, the majority of Ripper enthusiasts believe that he was Jack the Ripper. One thing is for sure, though, there will be many more suspects in this case, with countless theories and enthusiasts researching the new next big suspect. Tell us who you think is the most likely suspect in this timeless case in the comments section below. Is it Kosminski or the number 2 on the list, Francis Tumbley?